The exact age your body begins to lose strength is probably younger than you might think, and understanding this might completely change how you approach fitness for the rest of your life. Most people assume that physical decline is something that happens in older age, maybe in your 70s or 80s. But a remarkable 47-year study has just shown us that the decline actually begins much earlier. And what's even more interesting, that it's not just about when you start declining, but where you're starting from when that decline begins. Today we're going to walk through what might be one of the most important longitudinal studies ever done on human fitness and aging. We're talking about following the same group of people for 47 years, from their teenage years right through to their early 60s, measuring their physical capacity the entire time. And what this study reveals about when your body peaks, about when it starts declining, and about why your fitness in your 20s and 30s matters so much for how you age is really, really surprising. So before we get into the findings, it's worth really just understanding what makes this research so valuable. Because this isn't just your typical cross-sectional study where the researchers compare different age groups at one point in time. This is a true longitudinal study called the Swedish Physical Activity and Fitness Study, published in the Journal of Cachexia, Sarcopenia and Muscle in 2025. And it followed the exact same individuals from around the age of 16 all the way up to age 63. That's 47 years of data on the same people, watching how their physical capacity changed across their entire adult life. The researchers measured things like aerobic fitness, muscular endurance, and overall physical performance repeatedly over decades, which gives us an incredibly clear picture of how the human body ages in real time. This isn't guesswork or estimates based on comparing different people of different ages. This is watching the actual course of aging unfold in front of us. And what they found challenges a lot of what we think we know about when physical decline really begins, and more importantly, what we can do about it. So the first major finding from this study is that your aerobic capacity and muscular endurance peaks somewhere between your mid-20s and mid-30s. For most people, that peak happens before the age of 36. So if you're in your early 30s, like me, and you feel like you're at your physical best, you probably are. And if you're approaching 40 and you feel like you're not quite as strong or as fit as you used to be, well, the data would suggest that you're right. Now, this might seem quite obvious to some people, especially if you've been involved in competitive sports, because we all know that elite athletes tend to peak relatively young. But what this study shows is that these patterns hold true for everyone, not just professional athletes. Your cardiovascular fitness, your ability to sustain physical work, your muscular strength and endurance, they all reach their highest levels in early adulthood, and they simply don't continue rising beyond that point. And here's where it gets interesting. For a long time, a lot of people assumed that if you trained hard enough or you just stayed active, you could keep improving your fitness indefinitely, or at least maintain your peak for many decades. But this study suggests that that's not really how human physiology works. Once you reach that peak in your mid-30s, the direction shifts. You're no longer building capacity the way that you did in your 20s. Instead, you're now trying to preserve what you've already built. So when does the decline actually start? Well, the data shows that after your physical peak, which for most people is around 35, 36, your aerobic fitness and strength begin to decline gradually. And this isn't just something that suddenly kicks in when you hit 60 or 70. It starts right there in your mid-30s and continues steadily forward from that point. The decline happens at a rate of roughly 1 to 2% per year once you've passed your peak. And that rate tends to accelerate as you get older. So in your 40s, you might be losing maybe 1% of your aerobic capacity each year. But by your 60s, that might be closer to 2 or 3%. And if you're not doing anything to counteract that decline, it compounds over time. That's how people go from being reasonably fit in their 30s to struggling with basic physical tasks in their 60s and 70s. What's really striking about this study is that the decline rate is fairly similar across individuals. Whether you were highly fit at your peak or just moderately fit, you tend to decline at roughly the same percentage rate once that peak is reached. And if you had average fitness at the age of 35, well, the same thing happens. The decline is gradual, but it's consistent. And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. They assume that if they just exercise a bit here and a bit there, or if they maintain a decent level of activity, they'll be able to hold onto their peak fitness indefinitely. But the reality is that decline is just inevitable once you've passed your physical prime. The question isn't whether you'll decline. The question is how much capacity you've built up before the decline starts and how effectively you can slow that decline down. So this brings us to probably the most important insight from this entire study, which is that your fitness level in early adulthood sets your trajectory for the rest of your life. The people who were fitter in their 20s and 30s, who had higher aerobic capacity and greater muscular endurance at their peak, stayed significantly fitter decades later, even though they were declining at the same rate as everyone else. Think about it this way. If you reach a peak aerobic capacity of, say, 50 mil per kilo per minute, which is the units of aerobic capacity, so 50 in your early 30s, and you decline at 1.5% per year, by the age of 60, you might be down to around 35. But if you only ever reached a peak of 40 because you weren't very active in your 20s and you decline at the same 1.5% per year, by the age of 60, you're down to around 28. That's the difference between being able to walk upstairs easily and being winded by just a few steps. So it's not just about how fast you decline, it's about where you're starting from and when the decline begins. And this is why building fitness in your 20s and 30s is so incredibly valuable. You're not just getting fitter for today, you're building a buffer that protects you for the next 30 or 40 years. The higher your peak, the longer it takes for you to decline into a range where basic physical tasks become difficult. And this has massive implications for long-term health and independence. We know that physical fitness is one of the strongest predictors of mortality and disability in older age. People who are physically weak and unfit in their 60s and 70s are far more likely to develop chronic diseases, lose their independence, and even die earlier. But this study shows us that a lot of that is determined by what you did decades earlier. If you built up a strong physical foundation in your 20s and 30s, you're essentially buying yourself extra years of health and function later in life. Now, before all of this sounds too depressing, here's the genuinely uplifting part about this research. Even if you weren't particularly fit in your 20s and 30s, starting physical activity later in life still makes a meaningful difference. The study found that people who became more active as they got older, even if they were starting from a lower baseline, showed improvements in their strength and fitness of around 5 to 10%. And while that doesn't sound like a huge amount, it absolutely matters. A 5 to 10% improvement in your aerobic capacity or muscular strength can be the difference between struggling with daily activities and being able to live independently. It can reduce your risk of falls, it can improve your metabolic health, it can lower your blood pressure and reduce your risk of chronic diseases like heart disease and diabetes. So even though you might not be able to fully catch up to where you would have been if you'd been fit your entire life, you can still make significant gains and improve your quality of life. And here's another important point. While the decline is inevitable once you've passed your peak, physical activity can slow that decline down. People who stay active throughout their lives tend to lose fitness at a slower rate than people who are sedentary. So if you're in your 40s or 50s and you're thinking it's too late to bother, well, the data says the opposite. Every bit of fitness that you maintain or build now is fitness that you'll still have in 10 or 20 years. And that matters enormously. The key is to start now, wherever you are. If you're in your 20s or early 30s, this is your window to build the highest peak possible. Get strong, build your aerobic capacity, challenge your body physically, because you're literally setting the trajectory for how you'll age. If you're in your 40s or 50s or beyond, the message is different but equally important. You're not trying to reach a peak anymore. You're trying to slow down the decline and preserve as much function as possible. And the evidence shows that that's absolutely achievable with consistent physical activity. So how do you actually apply all of this information? Well, if you're younger, the priority is building capacity. That means training for both strength and cardiovascular fitness. Lifting weights to build muscle mass and strength, because that's going to protect you against age-related muscle loss later. Do aerobic training to build your cardiovascular capacity, because that's one of the strongest predictors of longevity and healthy aging. And don't just do one or the other. Both of them matter. Strength without cardiovascular fitness leaves you vulnerable to heart disease and metabolic problems. Cardiovascular fitness without strength leaves you vulnerable to muscle loss and frailty. You need both, and your 20s and 30s are the time to build as much of that as possible. Now, if you're older, the priority shifts towards preservation and maintenance. You're not going to set personal records in your 50s or 60s unless you were very inactive before, but you can absolutely maintain a level of fitness that keeps you healthy, independent, and functional. And that has to be the priority. That means continuing to do both resistance training and aerobic exercise, but with a focus on consistency rather than intensity. The goal is to slow the decline, not to peak again. And regardless of your age, the message is the same. Physical fitness is not optional if you want to age well. It's not about vanity or looking good, although those might be nice side effects. It's about function, independence, quality of life, and longevity. The data from this 47-year study makes it crystal clear that the fitter you are in early adulthood, the better you'll age. And even if you're starting late, every bit of fitness you build or maintain still matters enormously. So let's bring all of this together. Your peak physical capacity peaks in your mid-20s to mid-30s, and the decline starts right around the age of 35 or 36. That decline is gradual but consistent, happening at about 1 to 2% per year, and it accelerates as you get older. Now, the people who build the highest peak in early adulthood stay fitter for decades longer, even though everyone declines at similar rates. And even if you weren't fit earlier on in life, starting physical activity later can still improve your fitness by 5 to 10%, which makes a huge difference to your health and your quality of life. There's a window where your peak really matters, but it's never too late to be better. Fitness builds resilience long term, and the sooner you start, the stronger you stay. Whether you're 25 or 55 watching this video, the message is clear. Move your body, challenge it, build strength and build endurance, and do it consistently. Because the fitness you build today is the foundation for how you'll age tomorrow. And according to 47 years of data following real people through their entire adult lives, that foundation matters more than almost anything you can do for your long-term health.